Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at another session with Thomas and his horse Hombredon. This is the second time we've seen him. His first video was exceptional work, as is this one. Really well done. Wanted to quickly answer one of your questions that they had asked, which was about using a rubber bit versus a metal bit on a young horse or any horse. I would just say I have nothing against it. I personally don't use anything but the same bits. I use French loose ring snaffles, usually double jointed, that is with a French link as they call it, sometimes not. Not for any particular reason, one or the other, whichever the horse seems comfortable with, but I don't really use any other kinds of bits, that's it. So I hope that helps. I just have never really found the rubber bit thing to be of any real value. I mean, if you're doing it right, you're not putting so much pressure on the horse's mouth that the metal bit's going to hurt him in any way anyway, so it doesn't really seem to be a problem. So that's my answer on that one. So getting back to this one, once again, really nice working walk right here, right off, just like you did in the last one. That's really quite nice. I might like to see his neck just a little bit longer when he's flexed there at the pole. But really, that's very good, and you're letting him down even that, right, more like there. I felt like he came up a little too high for his level of back development there for just a moment when you first started out. This is much, much better. The other question that Thomas had for me was about, where to start the leg yield in terms of the position of the head and neck. And, the reality is wherever you can get it done comfortably, and as you progress, we'd like to get to the point where the horse can do the lateral work completely stretched all the way down, as it will help him and facilitate letting his back come through and develop. So just make that your goal, but as long as the horse is not tense and you're losing the rhythm, that being the biggest thing. So if you feel the horse tense in his back as his heads come up, it's not, remember, that's not the head and neck position that's important. It's whether the back is allowing the horse to come through. So what's important is the horse's head and neck be at a height that is not too high, that we don't drop the back. That's the trouble with all these people trying to get headsets in the front end. That was really quite a nice leg yield right there. So wherever the horse can be comfortable at the moment you're doing it and not lose the rhythm and stay over his back. That, and once again, the back guides all of our training. So if you feel that what you're doing is losing the horse's back, then we've got to do it a little bit differently. That is getting to stretch out longer through the neck. But I'm not seeing here anything that's a problem whatsoever. That's a really good rhythm right there. Really good work. It was also interesting to hear Thomas and his wife's background. They've worked with many classical trainers, including Michel Henriquet, who I talked about in a video recently, who just recently died, sadly, who was very important to me in my development, understanding what Mr. Oliveira was doing, because I really didn't understand it till I saw Mr. Henriquet's horses that Nuno had worked with for many, many years, and was able to see horses that had been developed for years in that style and how incredible they were. So great job. No wonder you're riding so well. Good stuff. So really good walk here. All this lateral work is really good. Once again, nothing is exciting. And I'm about there, yes. And this is a perfect example of a horse. I mean, this horse, remember, every horse can collect, to whatever degree its hocks allow that to happen. And the most difficult horses, as we always say, are the horses straight behind. Those are the ones that, dressage is certainly going to improve them, but and will help them a great deal. But if you're looking for a horse, for really quality dressage work that you really want to enjoy, stay away from the ones with really straight hind legs. That's the end of the story, because they are very difficult and take a long time to train. But what you're doing here is just perfect. And, once again, that idea of, it's the back and the total length of the top line that we need to get engaged. So this idea that many people have about putting the head and neck in some position or other that they think is what it's supposed to look like is what's led to so much difficulty and lameness and sourness for so many horses, because every horse has a different position if the head and neck comes out of the shoulders. Like this one comes out of the shoulders rather straight, more like a thoroughbred horse. Some of the Lusitanos and Andalusians have really big sloping shoulders and the necks come straight up out of them. So we have to take into consideration always the conformation of the horse. In other words, we can't put every round peg into a square hole, so to speak. But that's really good rhythm. All this work is really good. He's not too high in the pole right there. Very nice. And I love how you come back to the stretch. That's exactly what we want it to do. And look how much longer the footfalls become as soon as you let him release there, and all of a sudden it becomes more swinging. Remember, the whole point of the shoulder in or any of the lateral movements, especially the shoulder in leg yield, is simply to get the horse to step onto the body. and lift up to the back. As it steps under the middle of the body, it will tend to flex that hock more and push up to the back. So that's what we're looking to feel. So when we feel a good shoulder in or leg yield, we can feel it lift up on the inside seat bone as the horse pushes up to the back. If you don't feel that, the horse may be hollow or it simply is not engaging enough, that it has any real value. But when you feel it right, you'll feel your inside seat bone. Remember, for instance, the inside seat bone here is the right seat bone because it's the direction of the bend, not the direction you're going in the arena. So when we say inside or outside in dressage, we're always talking about the side in which the horse is bent, not the direction the horse is going in the riding arena. But once again, that was really nice. And I can see you say, he wants to pull up a little bit, but you corrected him absolutely beautifully. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And once again, I love how you come back the stretch. Everyone, watch how the footfalls change. The leg yield, it tends to shorten him up just a little bit, though it was effective. And it was effective because when he came back, the walk was become longer and he was immediately able to stretch forward and down. And that's what we want to see. So this is all really, really good work. And once again, don't be concerned about this thing of riding with your hands a little wider at times. That, once again, this is schooling riding. It's not what we do in the show ring. Once again, that's what's wrong with most teaching today is they teach people to pose on horses as if the horse is going correctly, And of course, the problem is if a horse is hollow, if you sit correctly and sit straight through the middle of its back is going to drop even more. That's why sometimes, we lift up and come back and actually lighten our seat on a hollow horse, but not by leaning forward. You can work in a little forward position with really short stirrups, but when you have a longer, more dressage-length stirrup, if you lean forward, it just puts all the weight on the horse's forehand. So if we want to lighten the seat, we can lift our shoulders and chest and lift back a little bit and just move our weight off of the center of gravity. Really nice rhythm. A little more difficult for him there. You can see how the first couple of steps was a little harder for him, and that's very natural in these movements. A little bit of loss of rhythm there as he comes to that. But that's a nice big deep cross, but it's hard for him, as you can see, and he may bring his head up for a moment there, but you corrected him absolutely beautifully. So keep trying to get it as deep as you can, and then, of course, doing the same things up as high as we can. That is, bringing the pole up as high as we can without losing the back. And once you understand how the back guides the training, it just simplifies everything we're doing. There's no point in trying to push a horse through something that you're trying to do with a hollow back. It's only going to resist, or it's going to break at the third vertebrae in the neck and come behind the bridle, which is why we see so many horses at the upper levels of dressage today hollow and behind the bit. For that very, very reason. So once again, there's no point in doing anything with the horse hollow unless it has its goal to make the horse, round to the back and get it to lift up to the back. And of course, that can only come if we find the right position of the head and neck. And once again, over time, as the horse develops, the shoulders pull up through the shoulders, and the withers rather pull up through the shoulders, and we have a much more uphill standing horse. In other words, you can actually change what looks to be the conformation of a horse if you do this work correctly. That was the whole idea. Good rhythm in that. Nice stretching forward into the contact. How beautifully you maintain the contact and how quiet your legs are, never pounding on the horse. And even there, I could see you use your legs, and that's exactly right. Anybody watching this, back up and see how he impulsed with his leg, and the leg immediately relaxed again. That's what we want to see. The aids should never be held against the horse. Your hands are never held against the horse's mouth. Your legs are never pressed in, held against the side of the horse, and especially we don't do them both at the same time. And what leads to horses being resistive is people pulling and pushing, conflicting the aid. So, if when you're riding, your horse is pinning its ears back and swishing its tail when you're trying to do collection, quote, there's probably something seriously wrong with what you're doing. We should never have to fight with horses. The only thing we really have to insist upon is the horse move forward. That is, move forward and engage forward under its body, away from pressure. But that pressure is never consistent. And once we have that, which is a natural thing, once again, it's why when we lunge horses, for instance, we tap them in that fleshy area above the hock there, which if you ever watch horses in pasture, that's how they discipline each other, where they have to yield their hindquarters to whoever is the head horse, so to speak. So that's where we start there, and why we spend so little time standing still or reining back. These are not things that horses do, naturally, in the sense of no horse would ever make another horse stand still. It couldn't. It can make it move away and move to where it wants it to do. If you ever watch a stallion work a herd, that's what they do. So, we want to base our training on that same principle of just getting the horse to engage forward and yield its hindquarters. Shoulder in there. Once again, you could see how the horse lost a little bit of rhythm in that, but once again, you do just the right thing. Come back to it. So come back to the stretch and let him stretch back out again, regain the rhythm. That's the whole thing. Every time we do an exercise that we lose the rhythm, keep the exercise and try to do it. Don't think it's wrong. As the horse gets better, it will just get easier and easier for it to do these things. And if you keep coming back to the stretch, you'll find that the horse, as I always say, the horse will forgive you all of your transgressions if you make a mistake if you come back to the stretch. But if you're making mistakes and holding the horses against your hands, they're going to get pissier and pissier about the job that they're doing and less willing to do it. But as we talk about all the time, it's the nature of horses to want to move. So if they don't want to move, there's something seriously wrong with what you're doing, or with the health of the horse itself in some way. Good trot here. I'd like to see him stretch a little bit longer in the neck, but you're working towards that. Kind of like it was in the walk. He started a little short in the neck, but now as he's going, he's reaching. There you go. That's what we're looking for right there. Very nice. Good. Now, could you all see how all of a sudden, as soon as he got that little bit more forward in the neck, the hock started working. All of a sudden, we saw a round circle in the hock, and the horse looks more balanced. His shoulders look freer. All of a sudden, we look like we have a good working trot, that it's swinging over its back and going somewhere. And interesting too, you see yourself riding, this rider in a ring that looks kind of wet and maybe a little bit sloppy. The point of correct dressage work is that, you balance the horse kind of like a four-wheel drive on all four wheels, so to speak. So you can go over, much rougher terrain and this sort of thing. That's why it's so important the horses balance on their own and not against our hands, so that they can right themselves, when they hit a hole. Too often today, people have become, very dependent on, having perfect footing everywhere they ride. This is a beautiful trot right here. Once again, that's a perfect working trot for this horse at this level. Now watch, he got a little bit short there as you came around there. Once again, he gets a little bit longer in the neck there. Once again, it swings better like that. Very, very nice. And Thomas was telling me in a letter here briefly that he'd been riding this horse for about 3 years and it just wasn't developing. Nothing was really happening. And now that he's got the horse really working over its back, how much it's changing. And that's what you all have to realize. None of your horses, if you're not getting them over their backs, you're basically destroying them. If you're continuing to ride horses that are hollow, they just start getting, as we see nowadays, so many of these upper level dressage horses just look like they're knotted up. They're hollow in the back and the neck is all cranked over, and their muscling looks knotty rather than, long and supple muscles that allow free swinging gaits. Once again, beautiful here. Could be a little bit longer, and you can see once in a while he looks like he's a little bit behind the vertical, and that's where we want to just try to get him out there a little bit, just like you did just then. You felt it, and obviously this man has a good sense of feel. And once again, look how his leg, when he put his leg on, we were talking about before, I showed you his leg, he put it on like you want your aids, especially the leg, to be like a karate chop, in the sense that, it's very quick, it's fast, and then it's completely relaxed again, and it's gone before the horse gets a chance to resist it when you hold the aids. That was a really nice downwards transition. Once again, he came very softly back into that. Did it just right. So we never want anything to be abrupt. It's just like driving your car. If you keep slamming on the brakes, pretty soon you're not going to have any brakes. Well, that's what happens to horses. We see this all the time, in these horses that are constantly stopped up, the way they're training some Western horses these days, and the kind of jumper riders who slam on the brakes and yank the horses back all the time, thinking they're making them balance, and all they're really doing is slowing the horse down. It's really nice lengthening here. I love see how he started to do the lengthening, he let him out through the neck. That's what you want to see, because as we lengthen the frame, the horse must lengthen the neck a little bit in order to free that shoulder a little bit and let the hind leg continue to come through. Remember, in correct work, the hind leg and the front leg are swinging absolutely together, like we see here. There's never any disjointedness. So when you see upper level horses that seem to be throwing their front leg straight out, but the hind leg seems to be almost like a jackhammer coming up and down, that's a horse that's extremely hollow. So once again, even this footing that doesn't look absolutely perfect, to see how easily, once in a while he may step on a little hole there, we see, but he skips right over it. And that's why we want our horses to be balanced. If you ever were fox hunting or something like that, and you're on a horse that's on its front end, it steps in a hole and away you go. A horse that is balanced over its back, that's really beautiful right there. And once again, how you can see all those muscles in the top line of the neck and behind the saddle there just lighting up beautifully. So as I said, a horse that's balanced is going to skip right over a little hole. It's not going to just plunge into it. Really lovely right there, really good rhythm. Really good length of the neck right there. That's where I really like this horse. And so notice he isn't overbent there or cranking over in the neck. He looks like he flexes a little bit back in the neck once in a while. If he doesn't have his neck quite out where it belongs like it is there, that's when he comes behind the bridle a little bit. So I see you are aware of that, and that's a wonderful thing. You're doing just the right thing. I have no problem. I hope everyone watches this video and You see how someone on their own, I mean, obviously this rider has some experience, but once again, he's not doing anything that's any, Herculean feat, as people have begun to believe. We see these trainers who get on and beat up these horses and ride this very active athletic style, and then the poor people who own the horses get on, and there's no way, as I always say, it takes a lot of skill to ride badly, to ride that badly. The other thing I say is don't mistake the ability to stay on with the ability to actually train. So some of these riders get very good at staying on, like a bucking rider, and they can beat these horses up and try to put them in these phony frames. They get away with it, to the degree they're not obviously listening to the horse, because if they looked at their horses, they'd see what a mess they have, but they obviously don't. So, the student gets on, we get horses all the time where the people buy horses and, 2 months later, they can't even get near them because the trainer has them so crazy. Once again, nice lengthening here. So once again, it doesn't take any big Herculean feat of skill or strength to be able to train and develop a horse. You simply have to know what the right principles are to follow. As you see, this man is using very little effort against the horse, so to speak. Very nice leg yield there. Very good rhythm, and you can see he's got the right idea. That is, every time he loses something a little bit, he just comes back and lets the horse stretch back out like that, and it's getting better. His hocks are working better with each stride. So this is really wonderful work and will lead to something. So all of you take heart and understand, when you think dressage is so complicated, this is the hard part of it. Once you get a horse to work over its back, the rest of it is just teaching the horse cues and giving the horse time to develop. So it's not like you have to have this amazing level of physical ability. You need to be fit, of course, don't get me wrong here, but if a horse is trained correctly, as you see with some of our horses that that become schoolmasters, they're easy for people to ride because they know the job, but they're not afraid of the job, as we talk about very often. The horse should not be afraid of the aids. And then it becomes a willing participant. Another lovely downwards transition there. Thomas, this is absolutely wonderful work. You and your wife are doing a great job. So Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Keep it up, and we'll see you next time.